look at the top 10 because this weekend we have, and I'll work from the bottom to the top, 6 versus 8, Ravens at the Giants. We have 4 versus 1, Cowboys versus the Eagles, and we have 2 versus 3, Chiefs versus Bills. 3 games among teams in the top 8 this weekend.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It really is. And again, I think we're slowly starting to see, the cream of the crop rise to the top here as far as the NFL a little bit. It's still amazing how jumbled together it is, but I don't know. Did you have any thoughts at all, the top 3, just to hit on that right away? I mean, they're clearly the top 3 teams in football right now, Eagles, Bills, Chiefs. Was there any thought of how to juggle those around? Did you think of maybe making one of those one-loss teams the number 1 team?
No, well, it would have been the Bills, if anybody, because of what they did to the Steelers.
Yeah,
because they beat them 38-3, and the Eagles had to survive a trap game in Arizona. But you know what? Every team is going to have a trap game from time to time. And the Eagles survived it. I think that's a credit to them.
Sure.
That's one where in past years, that team that starts off 4-0, we're really not sure how good they're going to be. Oh, okay, they lose one, especially when they have a big division rivalry looming. I'm impressed, maybe even more impressed by the Eagles that they held it together and got that win because they're showing a level of week in and week out mental toughness. And Nick Sirianni, the head coach, was saying this week he just wants to go 1-0 every week. And every once in a while, you have a team that can live up to that cliche and just keep going 1-0 every week. And the Eagles so far, I don't know what's going to happen this weekend with or without Dak Prescott. They're going to have their hands full with the Cowboys, but they have emerged as, in my mind, the best team, and they should stay there until they lose. And even then, I don't know how far they're going to fall.
Yeah, okay. I mean, listen, they're definitely one of the best teams. We know that. And even if they do lose this weekend, they're not going to lose many times here the first 10 or 12 weeks of the year. All right, so where I'm interested is all right, Cowboys at 4. I got no problem with that, but did you think about putting the Bucs in front of them at all, or do you feel really confident about just keeping them at 4? I know the Bucs are a 2-loss team, but did beat the Cowboys down in Dallas. There's that conversation, and I think we think the Bucs are probably a little bit better than what they have played so far. So, any thoughts there?
Well, the Cowboys already were ahead of the Buccaneers, and I think the second loss is what caused the Buccaneers to fall. If all things were equal, I think the Buccaneers would be ahead of the Cowboys. But the Cowboys go into L.A. and win 22-10, and I know it was home away from home from the Cowboys, as we correctly surmised last week when we were talking about how Cowboys fans would overrun SoFi Stadium. But still, to dismantle the Rams the way they did, that's why they're number 4. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why the 49ers are up in the top 10 now. They were 11 last week.
Yeah.
I mean, they are showing signs of dominance.
Right.
And Chris, I've said this before here, and I wrote about it in the power rankings, I think, this week. They're the team that the Eagles need to be worried about in January. They better hope the playoff tree doesn't fall together in a way where it's 49ers at Eagles, because that's where the Eagles train may run into a brick wall.
Well, that's the NFC Championship game I picked before the year. That's where I those two teams. That was my only question, I think, Mike, on your in your top 10 is I would have had the 49ers probably number 5 right behind the Cowboys. I would. I know it hasn't been perfect, but I mean, I think to your point and what you're talking about is the 49ers, they're not even a healthy football team, and it's been absolute just physical dominance over the Rams and the Carolina Panthers. And Jimmy G, I mean, we see, as long as he just doesn't do total dumb crap stuff, that they're one of the best teams in football. He literally just has to play average or a little above average, and they're a Super Bowl contender. It's really as simple as that. So that's where that would be the only one, I think, in your top 10 or top 12 that I would go, I think you're being – I think the 49ers I certainly would take. I think you're being a little nice to the Ravens. I would have the Ravens down, below. I would have the 49ers at 5 and bump everybody down. I guess that's what I'm saying, long story short.
Couple questions here. Terry Gensler, 14. Which of these 3 top 10 matchups that we discussed do we think has the most significance? Which is the biggest of the 3 games? I think clearly the least significant is Ravens-Giants, just because the other 2 stand out. But which of those 2, Eagles hosting the Cowboys, Chiefs hosting the Bills, is a bigger game to you?
I think
and set aside the fact that one of them's on NBC.
I know, yeah. I mean, listen, they're all big. But I look at the Bills-Chiefs one to be the one. I do. I expect them to if all things fall right, I'm Clash of the Titans, AFC Championship game. Bills, Chiefs. That's where I expected. And where this goes into is I could see them having the same record at the end of the year, and this comes down to who won the head-on-head matchup to be the number 1 seed and get the first-round bye. And more importantly, just to play the other one at home, where Buffalo, I'm sure, is like, can we get the hell out of Kansas City? Right? So I would think that's the one that jumps out to me right now. I don't know. There's a part of me that's not ready to say Cowboys number 1 seed conversation yet, even though I'm getting close to that with the way they're looking here week after week.
Here's my effort to sell the idea that our game is bigger than
what
Chiefs.
A company
Bills.
guy. Kiss ass.
We know the Chiefs and Bills are good.
Right.
We know that.
Right.
Whatever happens in this game on Sunday, they're both going to be great, and they're going to be among the best in the conference. We still don't know what we have in the Eagles, and we're still not quite sure what we have in the Cowboys.
I got you.
So let's see them square off
I hear you.
See how it shakes out, because there's more unknowns in that game. And that's look. I'm not trying to
Johnny NBC
distinguish
over
our
here.
game. I'm just
no, I hear you.
I think it's an accurate observation.
Yeah.
One more here real quick. Flick Daddy, why have the Packers been ahead of the Vikings all year when the Packers lost to the Vikings in week 1 and the Vikings only lost to your number 1 team? And to anybody who asks that question, I say, have you watched the Vikings play? Have you watched their games? They should be 1-4 or 2-3. They keep pulling rabbits out of their butts late in the game. They are finding ways to win, and that is not sustainable. The only silver lining for the Vikings is something that Harrison Smith said earlier this week, Chris, that as they're learning their new coaching staff, learning the offense, learning the defense, they're winning games, which is going to help them later in the year when they've learned what they're doing. They're stealing wins at a time when they have no business stealing wins.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing. A little bit like you talked about, like with Philadelphia. They were asleep at the wheel, or kind of a letdown game. They still won. You're going, the Vikings aren't playing that good, but they're winning the games, period. And as you always talk, it's something that, provides some cushion for you later on in the year when maybe the schedule isn't as favorable. But I do think that's part of, this conversation too, is, we got some teams here in your top 10 or even in the top 12 or top half of the league who they've had very favorable schedules. I don't think you get into where you go, I don't know if they're quite as good as the team they're ahead of, but they got more wins and they're playing good. But damn, like we talk about with Dallas. Dallas has had very favorable matchups to this point. The Giants have had teams other than the Packers. And again, the Packers make every game close because it's dink and dunk and their defense is not as dominant as their statistics say. So that game is always close. That played into their hands, but they've played some teams that they certainly match up well to add to the 4-1 schedule, or 4-1 record. So that's something that I think, people forget about a little bit here in the early part of the year.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.